Hello, how are you? Welcome to Genealogy Quick Start. My name is Shamele Jordon, and I'm your host. You may not know this, but Genealogy Quick Start is available on YouTube, Facebook, and PhillyCam. Have you done it yet? Thank you so much. If you are a subscriber to our YouTube channel, thank you for liking our Facebook page. Thank you, PhillyCam Watcher. We are really happy to have you here today. If you are not subscribed and would like to do so, this would really help us out because we really enjoy knowing who's watching the show. And we really want to make sure that you know when a new episode is coming. Or maybe you just want to hang out with Michael and Jim. Do you feel that genealogy is important? Well, if so, subscribe and share with your friends. Again, welcome. If you are joining now, please let us know where you are, whether it's live or in replay. We just love to know where you are. So please type in the chat where you are. I see some of you know the drill and doing it already. Welcome. So, if you have a genealogy society, I love genealogy societies. Let us know. Which society are you joining from? Let us know. If you're an archive or a library, institution, share. If you want to, let us know where you are. And during the show, please keep the conversation going. Today, we have a very special guest, Judy Russell, the legal genealogist with the Legal Genealogist Reality Check. Judy is just so approachable, so engaging. You can learn more about how each of us, me, Jim, and Michael, know Judy personally by watching a short clip called Personally with Judy Russell. You can watch it on YouTube or Facebook. I remember one day I was sitting at Valley Forge and it was at an AUGS conference. AUGS stands for African American Historical and Genealogical Society. And we were at a conference. It was not too long ago, but we were in the big room. I believe it was dinner. There were hundreds of people. And there was Judy on the stage. And she was talking about enslavement in the North. And Judy was laying it down. I mean, the laws, the complexity, chapter and verse. I really thought for a moment I was in church. Like enslavement was the devil and Judy was kicking them in the, where Judy was kicking them in. But, if you've seen Judy before, to say engaging is really an understatement. But speaking of engaging, I would definitely, my buddies, my friends, my reason for being. If my reason is to be wild and crazy, how are you, Jim and Michael? We have Jim, Jim. I have my graphic on my face.
I look better that way. Fine.
We have Jim, columnist and author. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Shamele and the Genealogy Quick Start world.
And hello, Michael, author and blogger, genealogy tip of the day. How are you, Michael?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. I was trying to block that dude who's posting all those comments.
Yes. What is that?
I don't know what he's doing, but I've reported him as a spammer whammer.
Thank you.
I don't know what'll happen, but his neighbor started doing it too. I noticed that.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone. Let's see, who do we have on here? Look at that sadness. Oh my goodness. We have to figure out how to fix that. Hello, Angela Allen from Chicago. In Chicago. Oh, look at this guy. Hello, Kim in Ohio, visiting the son in Tennessee. Hello, son as well. Hello, Maureen in Middletown, New Jersey. Gary, people are beating you here, Toledo, Ohio. Denise Payne in the Netherlands. Did I tell you that the Netherlands is like my favorite outside of America country that I've visited? Maryland. Hello, Tony. Hello, Bonnie from Long Island and JGSU. Paula, West Deptford, South Jersey's here. Hello, Denise Osborne in Philly. Hello, Sherry in Connecticut. Jeannie, Michigan. I'm so sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Maria, how are you? She even said hi to Michael and Jim. She must like you guys. Hello, Susan in Bellington, Washington. Hello, Denise from Maastricht. How did you know I went to Maastricht? I stayed. Let me tell you about Maastricht. I have to just take 2 seconds. I was sent to the Netherlands for work, and I stayed in Maastricht, and I loved it so much that I called back and I said, hey, extend me for the weekend. Joe Hauser, Ohio, welcome, Cleveland group. We have so many here. I think I got everyone. Susan, thank you. Help me out with the spammers. All right, so it's time for us to do our quick start. So you guys have designed a quick start that will highlight a record type that I would easily say, and very easily say, that is the most baffling, underutilized record for genealogy. And so what is this quick start and why is it important?
Well, we're going to talk about state censuses. And the reason they're important is they give you another entry point into your ancestors' lives, residences. They're often taken at years different than the U.S. census. So it kind of allows you to add to the chronology of your ancestors.
And so, yes, exactly. The state census, it is, I mean, I'm shocked that so many people don't use them. So, Michael, where do people go at a high level to locate state census? Are they hidden somewhere on the internet? Is that why people don't find them?
They're in the far back corner of your bookshelf under that How to Deal with Difficult People book. The place I would start is to look in the Family Search catalog. That one place to start, and some of them on there they're digitized or indexed. You could also look to see if Ancestry has them, if you're a member of the Ancestry set of subscriptions. That may be a place to look and see if there are indexes. And the last kind of overarching place to look would be the state archives or state historical library website to see if there's any references to them there. There's other places, but those are the 3 biggies to get you started.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our quick start. Can you state the census? All right, and so step 1 is determine the place and time, the crosshairs of genealogy. Do we want to talk about that at all?
It's kind of obvious because if you don't have a place, you're not going to know which states to look at.
Right, and for some of these, even if there was a statewide census taken, the thing is no longer extant. So you want to know what counties your people were probably in to know whether that region of the state, the records are still there or not.
Exactly. So next, that takes us to our next step, which is to learn state census availability. So tell us about this cool map.
Well, I used a couple of different references to generate the map. Any state that's in blue had at least one state census. Now, keep in mind the time period that covers, how extant those records still are, can vary quite a bit. So don't assume there's a whole bunch of them just because the state is blue. This is just to give you a quick reminder which states have them and which states don't. You'll notice Pennsylvania is a different shade of blue. That's that's because Pennsylvania is special. It took a Centennial, what's called a Centennial Census. If I'm incorrect, Jim, refresh me on that. And not many of them are extant, that's not just a Pennsylvania thing. That happens for a lot of these earlier ones in particular. But the Pennsylvania ones were more based on people who were paying taxes. And so it was geared towards putting taxpayers in that census. And so if your ancestor was not paying taxes for whatever reason, he or she is not going to be listed in that census. And that may be true of some other sometimes that's documents that are used as substitutions for censuses that are missing. They were tax things, and that didn't generate everybody in that record. So when you do find out about one of these records, find out was it a true census where every warm body was counted? Was it just counting certain aspects of the population for one reason or another? Because that may explain why your dude or dudette is not listed.
All right,
Exactly.
Jim, you gonna let them slam PA? What's going on with that?
Well, he's right. It was, and the import of the Pennsylvania Centennial Census was to apportion our General Assembly, our legislature. And at the time, the only people who could, or starting out, the only people who could vote were white men with property. So those were the taxpayers. Those were the people who counted as far as apportioning the General Assembly. They took it all the way through 1863, and then after that, I think they relied on the federal census to apportion the legislature when they even bothered to reapportion it. So.
Well, New Jersey is great because they're in the middle. They're like the 15, the 5, the 15. And so bravo, New Jersey. Some of them you can't read, but they're just so wonderful. So let's move on to step 3, which is everyone's favorite step, which is to search for the census records. So Michael, what is it that you have here?
This is, of all the state censuses that were taken, this is probably the best one. In terms of the information that it gives. It's the 1925 Iowa State Census. It gives on the far right or far left, you see the name of the person. Was in fact on I think 3 or 4 different sheets, and they just flipped over. This is I think the second or third sheet, but it gives the birthplace, which is not too uncommon. It gives the name of the father of every person who was enumerated in the 1925 Iowa Census, and that enumerated every resident of the state. So you have their father's name, their father's birthplace. If the father was alive, how old was he on his last birthday? You have the mother's maiden name. You have the mother's place of birth. If the mother's alive, how old was she on her last birthday? And for reasons I'm not really clear, but who's going to complain, it's got the location of the parents' marriage in this 1925 census. It's a really great document, and I encourage people, if you've got a distant cousin that was living in Iowa in 1925, this is one thing you want to make. Other documents you may or may not want to see if you can find them in, but this is one for obvious reasons. If you've got a first or second cousin of an ancestor living there in 25, the location of the parents' marriage, which sometimes is as specific as the town in some cases, could be a huge clue or lead for you. It kind of depends on what you don't know. But this is probably the best one. It would be great if other states had taken one.
Yes, I love this. I love
really
this. Good. It should be a requirement.
Yeah, well, it would be nice if it would have been, but it does drive home the point that you don't want to make the assumption that it's going to be the same data bits as you get from the U.S. Census. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, and sometimes it's at variance, but it gives you another another opportunity to for it to say Baden instead of Germany if it's an immigrant for the birthplace, something like that to narrow things down. Yeah.
Love that. We have another example here.
This is the 1892 New York State Census. This one's in Warren County. This is a nice contrast to all the information that was in the 1925 Iowa State Census. It's got name, gender, age, where they were born, U.S. or Canada. That U.S. is really helpful. And then the occupation. They're not even broken down. You kind of have to infer the households from the ages of the individuals. There's other state censuses that do the same thing. They're just listed, and there's no indication of where one household starts and another one is. So you kind of have to infer that. I used to do that based on the ages. But you can't always, and the names, but you can't always do that. So it's not as informative, and it reiterates the point that Jim made. There's a lot of variation in these. The key is you always want to look for them because you don't know what they're going to say till you see them. And it, like Jim said also about that birthplace, it may give you a more specific birthplace than some other record did to help you out.
In the case of this specific one, 1892, it's very close in time to the destroyed 1890 U.S. Census, so it gives you a great proxy for that.
Right.
Great point, Jim. Great point. Let's take a look at our next example.
This is an 1885 Nebraska state census, and it goes back to what Jim said about that 1890 era. It's 5 years before that census that we don't have. This was a state census. There were several states with federal aid took a census in 1885. Nebraska was not the only one. There was also an agricultural census taken in Nebraska in 1885. But this is still the early day for Nebraska history. It's early days of settlement. It helps with the lack of the 1890, but it's still when it's a lot of frontier, and things like this are helpful in tracking people's movements, because we've got homesteaders moving in, other relatives are coming to stay with them for a while or whatever, and this can help. This can help with that. It's clear on the census where one household starts and another one ends or what have you. We trimmed that for the image, but the census itself will give that. We just cut that out.
Yep, and we have another cool example here.
This one is the 1855. Your logo there is covered.
Oh, sorry.
I think it's 55. Illinois state census.
Yep.
And this is typical of like those 1840 and before United States censuses. The only person who's named is the head of the household. Everybody else is in age categories. The neat thing about this one, this is James. There's one of my dudes. It's got the household structure, which I pretty well already thought I knew, and it was consistent with that. But you never know; somebody may pop up like the cat in the background. It's a surprise. James was a
Hello, kitty. I need to see the kitty.
She's hiding behind me, I think. James was a farmer, but it indicated there in the section for manufacturing that he was also running a cooperage at that point in time in that enumeration. And the funny thing is, he's listed in every census from 1850 until he dies in the 1880s. Every time he's listed as a farmer for his occupation, every stinking time. This census is the only one where it gives me documentation that he ran a cooper shop.
Very cool.
And it gives some clues in there about, I think, how much his barrels were worth or how much he sold in terms of production for that year.
Great social history facts. Yeah.
Yes, very nice. Very nice. Let's see. What do we have next? Speaking of Pennsylvania.
Yes, the much maligned Centennial Census. Because the interesting thing is that in addition to listing taxable inhabitants, it also listed the names of enslaved persons, usually just a first name and an age, but it at least gives you an idea of the black population at the time as they were gradually being manumitted in Pennsylvania. It was so gradual that the last enslaved persons in Pennsylvania are still documented in the 1840s. But the population did decline quite a bit, and so this is something you can use. And looking at the U.S. Census, then after they're freed, to get full names and get a window of them back almost to colonial times.
This is great, Jim. Love this census. Love this census. So I believe
I was looking in the comments. Kansas is another state that during the frontier era has a lot of state censuses, and that's when you've got people in a frontier era. The state censuses, if they're available, can be really helpful in tracking them as they're kind of moving around. It's too bad there wasn't a Virginia state census about 1680, to be really honest with you, or Pennsylvania or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be, and they were trying to track their population for a variety of political reasons. It wasn't to leave records for genealogists.
What do you mean it wasn't to leave records for us?
It was not to leave records for us. As a lot of these things, they were driven by politics, which we're not going to get into, by the way. But that's why in those early days of settlement, they were taking these in these off federal census years, because the population was changing quite a bit and moving around. And it goes back to Jim's comment about apportionment with that Centennial Census. They're trying to, apportion districts correctly based on the population, and the census is a way to do that.
Well, and the territorial ones were sometimes being used to justify, is this territory ready to become a state?
Exactly.
Does it have enough of a critical mass of population for that?
So you got to look at the economic reasons for these as usually is the most important reason, right?
It's money and politics.
Follow the money.
Follow the money. So are we ready to go to the next Jim? Jim, I love that 1800 enumeration. Like everyone's talking about 1619. Imagine being able to connect to an 1800 enumeration, and then go back from there. That's absolutely amazing. So step 4, are we ready for step 4? Did you guys love those viewers? Did you guys love those state census? To me, are just so rich, because you never know what you're going to get. One, and like you guys said, it fills in the years and the missing 1890.
It's like a box of chocolates. You never know. You set me up for that.
Or a pet in Michael's vicinity.
That's true.
Okay, Michael John Gump.
On to step 4, which is to compare state and federal census. So talk to us about that.
Well, to some extent, it's that chronology thing that we've talked about in the past and touched on today. You're creating a chronology of each of your ancestors, and finding them as many points in their life as possible, and once you know they're in. Kansas 1870 census and 1900 census, 1880 census that you've filled in the federals. Well, then, okay, did they have a territorial or state census? It's a logical next step.
Makes sense. So then we will go on to step 5, which is to search multiple transcriptions and indexes. So what does that mean?
Well, it's if you can't find them in one index, then you should look and see if it's been indexed separately by a different company or organization. That's particularly crucial if you think they were in Kansas or in Iowa, but you have no more specific location than that. Going through the entire state census, or any federal census, as a matter of fact, if you just have a state, is a very time-consuming process. So the first thing I would do, if I didn't find them in one index, before I tried a manual search, I would look and see if there were any other online websites or wherever that indexed it separately. I would make sure we talked about Soundex and search techniques in the previous quick start. I would make certain I'm using all those bells and whistles as creatively and as effectively as I can. Mm-hmm. And if those things aren't working, I would go back to what I know about this person. I would look like the cat is looking to make sure there's not some clue in there geographically about where they live within the state that might give me an idea of where to start first. So I'm just not going down the alphabetical list or whatever. And in fact, if you are doing a manual search, don't go alphabetical. Look at if it's Kansas, I would start with the eastern part of the state and kind of work my way west. Generally speaking, there will be exceptions to that, but if you have to do a manual search.
Yep. And from a repository standpoint, especially state libraries are a logical spot where there might even be some unpublished indexes or abstracts of state censuses.
Yeah, yes.
There was one for a county in Michigan that it was an 1840, I think it was 1845 state census, and apparently it was not taken for every county in the entire state. And I only found out about it because the library had transcript. They made copies of the film and then indexed it, and it was at the Allen County Public Library. And they just had it for a handful of counties. Fortunately, it was one of those things where it was a time where the county I wanted had it, which doesn't always happen, as we all know.
Very true.
Because my Pennsylvania county doesn't have those Centennial Censuses.
Oh, your county doesn't have it?
No, they're not extant for where my people were at.
Which county is that?
Bedford.
Oh, Bedford. Yeah, Mother Bedford. Yeah. Yeah, but there's a lot of other good stuff for Bedford.
Right, there's stuff.
And so Ohio, I saw the sadness of some folks from Ohio who are with ancestors in Ohio. But, what is there, like tax records for that?
That would be one option. It wouldn't list everybody, but it would be one option.
And earlier marriage records. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So let us review the quick start for can you state the census? Step 1 is, of course, determine a place and a time. Step 2 is to learn the state census availability. Step 3 is to search for the state census. And Michael provided many places, family search, ancestry, as well as state archives. Then step 4 is to go ahead and compare the state and the federal census, as you should be doing all your records. No record stands alone. Step 5, search for multiple transcriptions and indexes. And so that is the quick start for Can You State Your Census? Thank you, guys. That was great. That was great. Yeah. All righty. So we will move on to our next quick start. We have the Legal Genealogist Reality Check. And with Judy Russell. Hello, Judy. How are you?
I'm good, Shamele. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Terrific. Do you remember that time at the AUGS conference?
That was the first time I really had a big exposure to AUGS, and it left me so impressed with that organization. Among other things, look, dinner talks are usually fluff. Uh-huh. It's the nice, sweet stories. So what do they want? They want slavery in the North, and took it on head on. It was fabulous. It was,
and you were fabulous. You were fabulous. Your energy about the whole. We knew that you were just. I felt like I was there traveling, decade by decade with the law. So thank you.
Good. Well, thank you.
So today we're going to do the Legal Genealogist Reality Check. And so really, let's go ahead and just jump in, right? Sometimes basically what we're saying, and my friend told me this before, when I'm trying to plead a case, and he said, Shamele, there's law and order, and then there's real life, right?
That's it.
And I watch a lot of Law and Order, so I felt kind of like, what's he talking about? Law and Order is real, but there's reality. I know sometimes, right?
It's funny. My mantra, and everybody has heard me say this 100 times, that if you want to understand the records, you have to understand the law at the time and the place where the record is created. But that's not enough.
It's not enough. It's not enough.
You've done it. I've done it. We've all done it. There's that 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. And that's not what the speedometer says.
I don't know. My speedometer says that, Judy. So don't get me.
Well, maybe yours does. Mine doesn't.
All right. Let's go ahead and jump in with the quick start with step 1, because you said it already. You said step 1 is to determine a question, a place, and time, right? got to be specific about that.
We've
And then,
got to know exactly where we're talking about, because if we're going to be talking about, and some of our examples are things like, when did things have to be recorded? That's going to change. It's going to be very different between one state and another. So the example we've got on the screen is from the Texas State Library and Archives, and it's the availability of birth records in the state of Texas. And it explains very clearly that Texas birth records might begin in 1903, that's when you might find a record at the Texas State Library and Archives.
right.
The operative word being might.
And so that's step 2, is to know what the law is, and we start with the archives that kind of tells us, what it should be. But then Judy's like, go one step further and really dig into what exactly is the law. But before we get to the law, you did have, we were talking about your mom, right?
I'm the first in like 4 generations or 5 generations not to be born in Texas. And my mother was born in Midland County, Texas, either 1925, 26. Okay. She appears there with her family in Midland County in the 1930 census. So we've got my grandfather, my grandmother, my Uncle Billy, my Aunt Claudine, my Uncle Monty, and my mom. And she's listed as like 4.5 years old in 1930.
Okay.
So 25, 26, that's how many years after Texas law says there should be records?
Many. You don't have to be a mathematician. Many years.
It's a lot of time. So that's our question, is where are we going to find the birth record for somebody who was born probably 1925, 1926, Midland County, Texas? And we would expect it to be in the vital records of Texas.
Yes. But
we know that's another story.
So step 2, you said, of course, is to know the law. Exactly. And so you have some examples, like where were you getting like these examples of what the law is?
To find out exactly what the law required at a particular time in a particular place, the first place we want to go to are the statutes of the time and place. This one from Tennessee, for example, is telling you when the births and deaths had to be recorded. And this may actually be a little surprising, because Tennessee didn't start mandatory statewide recordation until 1913. So in a lot of jurisdictions, you have people there. I'm from Massachusetts. I've got town records from the 1600s. Yeah, well, my people are from the South. So I'm lucky I get something in the 20th century. So knowing the law, finding the exact law, is going to give us a kind of a start point of where we can realistically expect even to start looking for.
And so, Judy, many people might say, okay, the state might not have required it. Maybe look in the county.
Absolutely. And you want to know, was it done as a matter of routine? Was it done by state law, but only for a few years, like Kentucky in the 1850s, where from like 1852 to 1859, you all of a sudden get a bunch of records, and then nothing before and after until the 20th century. So you want to know what the law was at the time and place, but that's not going to give us a complete answer.
It's not going to there's the law, there's law and order, there's the law, and then there is the reality. And so did you say where you were able to find like these books that provide the statutes?
We haven't touched on that, and the answer really is to start first at your state libraries, because many of them will have digitized or at least put links to the digital forms of the state statutes on their websites. If you can't find a good state resource, you need to go to one of the 3 digitized book services: Google Books,
Google Books,
Internet Archive, HathiTrust Digital Library.
fantastic.
That's where you're going to find the law.
Okay, the law. So here's another one. You were talking about South Carolina and land. Tell us about this.
You know, this is a very early statute from South Carolina. It's the provincial period, 1731. And it says that all land records have got to be recorded in Charleston. Now, anybody who does South Carolina research knows there are not a lot of these records. There aren't a lot of marriage records in South Carolina. There aren't a lot of birth records. South Carolina is generally regarded as kind of like the black hole of Southern research. Why? Because people who didn't live near Charleston didn't bother recording. It was too hard. They were not going to go across the swamps and the rivers, so that no matter what that South Carolina law says, that's not what people did. That's the difference. There's your reality check. There's your law and order on one hand and real life on the other.
I think it's interesting that we expect our ancestors to always follow the law when we don't, right?
You couldn't have said it better. You couldn't have said it better. That's the bottom line.
So what do some people do, like in the South Carolina, like where we have that expectation that they're going to be in Charleston? Were they somewhere else, or were they just not available? They're just
in general, the people, particularly from the upcountry, which is where, of course, my ancestors lived, they didn't bother recording at all until the law changed and they were allowed to record the deeds in their own counties.
Okay.
And that's when the very first deeds will be recorded. Now, the land entries are terrific. They're digitized. You'll find them on the South Carolina website. But the deeds are going to be what most of us from upcountry are going to find as the very first land records.
Okay. There's another one, another law that has been, that's part of your research, and that has to do with Texas and marriage.
Texas law, like every jurisdiction, said how old you had to be to marry without parental consent. And this one will take us to a question we'll look at a little later, which is how old people might have been if they didn't quite follow the law. But this law expressly says, and we want to know what the law was, that to marry without parental consent in Texas in 1916, you needed to be 18 if you were a girl and 21 if you were a boy. So you'll find that very commonly in a lot of jurisdictions, a slight age difference between the males and the females, with the boys not considered to be quite as mature as early as the girls. No surprise there. So we want to know what the law was.
Okay.
That's our start point.
Yes.
But then we need to know, what did people really do?
What did they really do? And so you're saying the best way to know this is to, so you talk about what is the reality of the law, understand what the reality of the law is. And the way you do that, you're saying, is
absolutely, you want to talk to people who are specialists in the history of that local jurisdiction. And we're talking right down to the town and county level. These are the town genealogical societies, the county genealogical societies, historical societies, historians in that area who know what the actual practice of the time was, who will be able to tell you, don't go looking for that South Carolina marriage record. You're not going to find it. Don't go looking for a deed in Charleston from somebody who was in the upcountry. Don't necessarily look for a Texas birth record in 1925 or 26 because the reality was different than what the law required.
And we talked about, just where they are in general, because like I have a county that has two county courthouses.
Isn't that a pain? And you know that you're always at the wrong one with 15 minutes to go before you're going to close, and you're not going to make it to the other one in time. So yeah, you need to know where the records are. You want to talk to the locals, even about things as basic as they're going to tell you, don't go to the courthouse on Thursday morning because Myrtle's there and she won't let you see anything. You want to go on Friday afternoon when Maud is there.
Yeah.
In the back room.
Yeah.
You want that local practice. You want that local twist on these records because that's where you get the real story. The reality check on the law.
On the law versus the reality check on the law. Dean Henry is asking, is there a good repository for law requirements that summarize these for genealogists?
No, there isn't. And there really can't be until somebody, I keep getting nudged, put together a book with lots of this information for lots of the different jurisdictions. And the reason is that the law changes not only from jurisdiction, but from time to time. So you need absolutely to see the law at the time and the place.
So definitely that. And there are sometimes people kind of help us out depending on what it is. Like one thing that I like is the Stroud's slave laws.
Oh, yeah. There's a great book on just the slave laws of Virginia.
Is this the one you're talking about?
Would you think? That's a fabulous, fabulous publication.
And then there's one that's kind of an overall one. That's the legal history of slavery. These are the kind of books you get when you hang out with Heritage Books, and he has not asked for a promo, but this is where I got all these books.
That's the truth. And you have to have that kind of guide by subject, by location, by time.
Yes. Let's see. Jenny says, I've gotten pushback about getting records for people that have been in insane asylums. While there are books out there for them, are there archives here in Nebraska that said due to the HIPAA laws, they can't let me see them? How do I get to view these books? These people have been dead for more than 75 years.
Yeah, it's not HIPAA. Not if they've been dead for 75 years. HIPAA is a federal law. And HIPAA used to be the problem. Because HIPAA used to say if it's a medical record, it's closed forever.
Oh.
But they changed that in like 2013 so that HIPAA only closes the records for 50 years after the person's death. So it's not HIPAA. But where you are going to have problems is the state statutes. Many states close mental health records and you're never going to get them. You're just never going to get them. Some of them will have specific options to go to a court in the jurisdiction and try to get it released. And if you're going to do that, don't tell them it's for genealogy. Yeah. Get your doctor to give you a certificate that says that it's for your family medical history.
Yes.
And that's where you've got a fighting chance of getting them opened. But mental health records are tough. They're very, very hard.
And I would definitely say that reach out to Jonathan Weddes. I'll bring him on, reclaim the records. If there is a law that says that you should have those records,
right.
They would be helpful in doing that. Leslie Anderson. Hello, Leslie. She said there's certain laws re-enslaved free African Americans in Virginia. We actually, one of Judy's on here had something about intermarriage between people. Oh, here it is: Caucasian blood and black blood.
Yeah, there are lots of statutes that impact that. That's probably our Texas law. which even, let's face it, up until Loving versus Virginia, which is the 1960s, marriage between the races was not permitted in many, many jurisdictions.
Not
So we need
allowed.
to be aware of this, that this is not ancient history in a lot of respects.
So speaking about another law, a friend in South Jersey submitted this one. Wayne asked, can you solve a family? This is a dispute in the family. Judy, we need you. We have a dispute. And when they get disputes in New Jersey, you heard about disputes. Okay. We have a dispute. Oh, Judy's in Jersey. Jersey girl. This is the Jersey girl half hour.
There we go.
We have a dispute between our different family members doing genealogy. For place of death, some say you list the last residence of the person. Others state that if they die in a hospital or somewhere else, you list the actual place they passed away. In research, I have found it both ways. What is the proper way of recording the place of death?
Or birth or marriage. It's the exact physical location where that event occurred. If they died, as let's say my grandmother did, in a hospital in the city of Charlottesville, Virginia, even though she lived in Fluvanna County, her place of death is Charlottesville, not Fluvanna. You want to pay attention to the exact location. Now, you can list last residence, because that's probably where she got her last Social Security check, but that's not where she died. So if the event is death, it's the hospital in Charlottesville. If the event is last residence, that's Fluvanna County. So it's always the place where it occurred.
Okay, I hope there was some money on the table there, Wayne, and I hope that you won the money.
If you didn't, it's not my problem.
It's not her problem. And so you have, we're going to move on to step 5, which is to go ahead and then just do the research. I want to, before we move on to step 5, talk about the beauty of locals. When my cousin Floyd and I went to Florida to visit Tallahassee, the state capital, we went to the library there. We reached out to someone at the Historical Society for the county, and he had a wisdom tooth removed, but he was like, I'll be in there tomorrow. And I'm like, no, you don't have to come in here. But he came to the archives, and he's sent us stuff since. It really, the locals are your eyes and ears on the ground. And so
it's like my great-grandfather died in Lee County, New Mexico. And the Lee County historian knew that my second cousin and I were going down to see the grave. He arranged to have everybody who had known our great-grandfather, who was still alive, get together with us and tell us stories about him. The locals are so important in doing genealogy.
Super important. All right, let's move on to step 5, which is to do the research. And so we were talking about marriage in Texas. And so you have an example of your grandparents' marriage license.
This is my grandparents, my mother's mother and father, married in Wichita County, Texas, in October of 1916. And you can see the marriage license being issued on the 19th on the left, and on the right-hand side is my grandfather raising his right hand in front of a judge in Wichita County, Texas, and swearing that he was 21 and my grandmother was at least 18. Now, it's true that she was at least 18. Now, when they married, everybody said this marriage won't last. And it's true. It didn't last. It ended when my grandfather died 54 years later. So my grandmother had known this man all of her life. They grew up together in Oklahoma. Well, at least after my grandfather moved there. She married him in Texas. They lived together until his death in 1970. So she knew when he was born. And it was not old enough to be 21 in 1916. the reality check for ages. And we rely on a lot of documentation about ages in genealogy.
We do.
People lied. They lied when it was
All the time.
their interests to lie. He had just turned 18. His mother was dead. His father was a traveling salesman off gallivanting around the country, and he was hot to trot. So they crossed the river from Oklahoma, where they lived, went to a county where nobody knew him, and he lied.
And he lied like a rug.
Do it all the time. So there's the law,
and
law
then
and order, and then there's real life.
I love that. I love that. And so let us go ahead and look at the quick start for the Legal Genealogist reality check. So step 1, of course, determine a question, a place, and a time. Step 2, what is the law? You want to check your archives. You want to check the digital archives online, Google Books, Internet Archives, HathiTrust. Then step 3 is to understand the reality of the law. Step 4 cannot be replaced ever by anything online solely, is to reach out to the locals. That's your boots on the ground. Step 5 is then to go ahead and do the research. Love that quick start, Judy. Thank you, thank you, thank you for the reality check.
Thank you for having me.
Let's see. Speaking of reality, how are you guys? How are you guys? So, I forgot to actually save the thingy, but there is something that's going out on that's on recent, I would say, in the world of genealogy. And it's called Deep Nostalgia. I know that you guys have probably had some experience with it. I think I have it now. And for those of you who do not know what it is, I'm going to show you now. It's called Deep Nostalgia. And it's, who's it from?
My heritage.
Yeah.
My Heritage. Let's see. Oh, it's going to start without me. Hold on. I'm going to show you guys, share my screen. And we have a question. Is it cool or is it creepy?
I'm
So
going to tell you, it gave my grandma teeth in hers, and she didn't have that many teeth.
Hold on. Let me share my screen and get it going. Let's see. So this is my ancestor, Lucy. And this is her animated. And this is from My Heritage, Deep Nostalgia. Lucy was born about 1856 in Houston County, Georgia. And we've never seen her before because she's died in 1924. So I posed to my guest, is this cool or is this creepy? What do you guys think?
Both.
So when is it cool? You said both. So when is it cool? When is it creepy, Julie?
I think it's really cool when you're talking about somebody that you personally never met. And it's like an introduction to them as a living, breathing human being. It is really creepy when it is somebody you did know and the movements that they're making on the screen don't match your mental image. I think it can be both.
I'm gonna go with creepy because for the reasons that Judy said, because when somebody you know the movements aren't right, and my take on that is then that applies to those people whose movements I never saw. And when I saw Grandma with teeth, that was the end of it. That was just the end of it. Grandma only
did they really give Grandma teeth?
Yes, they did. They gave her teeth in that picture, and she only had a lower plate because they were too poor to have an upper and a lower set of teeth when she got dentures.
Jim?
Well, I'm going to say there certainly is a Night of the Living Dead aspect to it. But for the most, well, admitting that, I'm gonna say cool, because I saw one done by my friend with Family Search, Steve Young, who lost his mother when he was fairly young, and I could tell the emotion when he posted that, of how much that meant to him to have her emotions restored. That so, in his case, that he was cheated for many years with her that you wouldn't normally expect it. So
So it seems like we have a toss up. Let me see. We have a combination here. Some people say creepy. Renata say, hey, Renata girl. It says a little bit of both. Creepy. We see creepy. We see that's cool. The one that I just showed you guys is an ancestor of mine. He is my great grandmom's brother. I'll show you him again. He died when he was 7. We've never seen him before. We just have this picture of him on the steps with my grandfather and his brothers and his brothers. And so that one actually almost brought tears to my eyes, because we love this guy. He looks like all of us, but we've never, ever met him. So are there any other questions? I think everyone's saying some people think it's neat. It seems like it's a little bit of both. I asked, can I do my family pet? I really miss Andy.
No, I tried with the dog and it did not work.
It doesn't work with pets.
It wigged out on me and said, "It's not a human." And I said, "Well, I know that."
Well, somebody tried today with a casket picture, and because the eyes were closed, it didn't work for that either. So that's a little creepy. That's double creepy. I'm sorry.
What did they think was going to happen? The head was going to move in the coffin, or like?
Yes.
And he rose up.
Well, I think you need to dress up the pet in human clothes, and maybe then it'll take it.
I'll have to find one where he's got a hat and a little jacket. I'll have to see if it animates it.
Michael, that's your task. We will see it on the next show. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Judy, you are a treat. Michael and Jim, you're always
Thank
stellar.
you. Yes.
Thanks,
Shamele.
Everyone.
Thanks, Judy.
Have a great day.